You stare at the price tag, then quietly put it back on the shelf. You can afford it. You even want it. But something in you says no anyway. Why does spending $5 sometimes feel harder than it should? The real reason has nothing to do with your bank balance. It's far stranger than you think. By the end of this, you'll understand why the way you handle money today was written long before you ever opened a bank account. Every adult has a money story, not the one you'd tell a stranger at a dinner party, the quiet one, the one running underneath every purchase, every panic, every moment you freeze at checkout. That story didn't start with your first paycheck. It started in a kitchen, or a car, or a hallway, sometime before you were even old enough to count change. Psychologists call these early imprints money scripts, unconscious beliefs about money formed in childhood, usually before age 7, and carried into adulthood without ever being questioned. You didn't choose them, you absorbed them, the way a sponge absorbs water, silently, completely, without asking permission. Think about it. Did money get discussed in your house, or did it disappear into silence the moment it came up? Did a purchase spark relief, or did it spark an argument? Children don't need a lecture on finance to learn its rules. They just watch. A tense phone call with a bank, a parent's face when a bill arrives, a birthday where the gift was smaller than expected, and nobody explained why. None of that gets filed away as financial education. It gets filed away as truth. Here's where it gets stranger. Your brain doesn't store these early money moments as memories. It stores them as instructions. A single afternoon of watching a parent panic over an unpaid bill can quietly install a belief that lasts 30 years. Money is dangerous. Money runs out. Money is something to fear rather than use. And the opposite happens too. A childhood where money flowed freely, where wanting something usually meant getting it, can install a different instruction entirely. Money will always be there. Spending feels safe because scarcity was never real. Neither belief is really about numbers. Both are about safety. This is why two people with the exact same income can behave completely differently with their money. One saves obsessively, terrified of running out, even when their savings account says they're fine. The other spends freely, confident it will work out, even when the math says it won't. Ask either of them why, and they'll give you a logical-sounding answer. But logic isn't driving the behavior. Childhood is. Consider loss aversion, a concept popularized by psychologist Daniel Kahneman. His research showed that the pain of losing something is felt roughly twice as intensely as the pleasure of gaining something equal in value. Now layer childhood onto that. If your early money memories are tied to loss, a parent losing a job, a home, a sense of control, that pain doesn't stay in the past. It gets wired into how strongly you react to financial risk as an adult. The stakes don't have to be as high as losing a house. Losing $20 can trigger the same nervous system response because your brain isn't measuring the dollar amount. It's measuring the feeling. It's replaying an old alarm system that was built for a different, much smaller person in a very different situation. That's why a small financial setback can sometimes feel disproportionately devastating. It's not really about the $20. It's about every earlier moment that taught you loss was coming. Here's the twist most people never see coming. You don't have to remember the specific moment for it to control you. Most people can't point to the exact day their money beliefs formed. There was no single dramatic event, no defining scene you could describe on command. It was hundreds of small, unremarkable moments, stacked so quietly that none of them felt significant on their own. Which means the belief feels like personality, not history. There's a reason this is so hard to catch in real time. Childhood beliefs form before your brain has developed the ability to question them critically. A 6-year-old doesn't have the cognitive tools to think, this is one possible interpretation of what's happening with our family's money. A 6-year-old just absorbs the conclusion and moves on. That conclusion gets stored the same way a native language gets stored, automatically, effortlessly, and so deeply that it feels less like a belief and more like a fact about the world. This is part of why financial advice so often fails to change behavior. even when the advice is sound. You can hand someone a perfect budget, a clear plan, a step-by-step path to their goals, and they'll still find a way to sabotage it. Not because they're lazy, not because they don't understand the numbers, because the plan is fighting against a belief formed decades earlier, and beliefs formed in childhood tend to win against logic formed in adulthood, at least until the belief itself gets identified. You don't think, I'm anxious about spending because of something I witnessed at age 6. You think, I'm just careful with money. You don't think, I avoid checking my bank balance because silence used to feel safer than confrontation. You think, I'm just not a numbers person. The script hides itself by disguising itself as character, and once it's disguised as character, it becomes almost impossible to question. Why would you challenge something that feels like who you are? Now bring this into your actual life. Think about the last time money made you anxious, even slightly. Was it really about the amount? Or did it feel bigger than that, heavier, older, familiar in a way you couldn't quite place? That heaviness is often the real signature of a money script activating, not a rational calculation, a memory, wearing the costume of the present moment. This shows up everywhere once you know to look for it. The person who can't enjoy a purchase without guilt, even when they can easily afford it. The person who avoids opening banking apps for days, not because they're bad at math, but because looking at the number once meant confronting something painful. The person who overspends the moment they feel emotionally unstable, chasing the temporary relief that spending once provided during an unstable childhood. Even the person who feels a strange pull to keep every receipt, track every cent, and audit their own spending obsessively. Often that habit traces back to a childhood where financial uncertainty made control feel like the only available form of safety. None of these are character flaws. They're inherited instructions, running exactly as designed. There's another layer to this that rarely gets talked about. Money scripts don't just shape how you spend. They shape who you become financially attached to. People are often drawn, without realizing it, toward partners or friends who mirror the exact money dynamic they grew up with. If your childhood home treated money as a source of control, you might unconsciously recreate that dynamic in adult relationships, either by seeking control yourself or by handing it over to someone else entirely. If your childhood home treated money as something to avoid discussing, silence becomes your default setting in every financial conversation you have as an adult, even ones with real consequences. This is why financial arguments in adulthood so rarely stay about the actual number. A disagreement over a $50 purchase can escalate in seconds, not because $50 matters that much, but because two different childhood scripts are colliding in real time. One person learned that spending equals freedom. The other learned that spending equals danger. Neither one is wrong. They're just running different code. Think about how this plays out at work too. The person who undercharges for their time, who feels guilty asking for a raise, who apologizes before naming their rate, that pattern rarely comes from a lack of confidence in their skill. It usually comes from an early belief that wanting more, needing more, or asking for more was somehow inappropriate. Maybe a parent modeled quiet self-sacrifice as a virtue. Maybe asking for anything extra as a child was met with a sigh, a look, a subtle signal that wanting was a burden. That signal doesn't disappear by adulthood. It just changes shape, dressed up as modesty or humility instead of what it actually is. On the other end, some people overspend specifically in moments of stress, and it's worth asking why relief and spending became linked in the first place. For a lot of people, a purchase in childhood, a small toy, a treat, a new pair of shoes, was one of the few tools available for soothing a hard day. If comfort and spending were paired together enough times, growing up, the brain doesn't forget that pairing just because the person is now 35 and paying rent. The habit isn't really about the object being bought. It's about chasing a feeling that was learned decades earlier. Here's the part that changes everything, though. A script that was learned can be examined, not erased instantly, not fixed by trying harder, but noticed slowly, deliberately, the same way it was installed. Through repetition, through small moments, through paying attention to what your body does the next time money enters the room. The next time you feel that specific tightness before a purchase, or that specific relief after spending, or that specific silence when a bill arrives, pause for 1 second longer than usual. Ask where that feeling actually started. Not the story you tell about being bad with money, the real origin. 9 times out of 10, it traces back further than your first job, further than your first bank account, back to somewhere small and ordinary and completely forgotten. You stare at the price tag again. This time, you notice something. It was never really about the $5. It was about a version of you, much smaller, learning what money meant long before you had any say in the matter, long before you even had the words to describe what you were absorbing. If something in this video felt familiar, a specific memory, a specific moment growing up when money felt tense, or silent, or unpredictable, drop it in the comments. Name the moment. What's the earliest money memory you can still picture clearly? Naming it out loud is often the first step to separating what you learned from who you actually are. And if this is the kind of thing you want more of, the money stuff nobody else slows down to explain, subscribe. There's more where this came from.